I am going to show you how Pride and Prejudice explains industrial hog farming. Yep, for real, I'm afraid. Also, there's a big showdown in the US Farm Bill right now about hog farms and animal welfare. So either watch this whole thing or skip ahead to this timestamp to find that. Anyway, I've got good news and bad news for Jane Austen fans. Her work is way more important for the fields of rural economics and politics than anybody thinks it is. But once you see it, you're never going to see things the same way again. Mr. Darcy, still cool. Mr. Collins, way worse than you thought possible. I will focus on the United States, but if your country's ever been colonized by the British, you might be able to relate. Now, since we're talking landed gentry, we're naturally going to focus on the top 10% or so of US farmers by wealth and income. But here's the thing, their farms are exactly where the bulk of our food comes from. If you've ever heard that, well, most of our food comes from a few very mechanized and corporate farms, that's what's actually going on. It's the landed gentry.
The love stories in Pride and Prejudice get most of the attention, but there is so much wild trash talk about the landed gentry in there, and you can really see that in some of the characters and the hijinks they get up to. Let's start with Elizabeth Bennet's parents. Elizabeth Bennet is the main heroine protagonist, and the main hurdle that she has to overcome in life is her parents, because they suck. You'll often see the Bennets described as poor. The 2005 film version really leans into this, I think, to kind of play up how the Bennets aren't like other gentry. Look, they're country, and they complain about money, so obviously they're poor. The reality is the Bennets are stupid rich, just in a way that, for a lot of modern audiences, and especially most Americans, just doesn't compute. We tend to think of wealth in a very middle-class way, and the Bennets are not middle-class. The Bennets are pulling £2,000 a year. That puts them in the top 0.2% of English society. To be in the top 0.2% in today's US, your family would have to make $20 million a year. If that is poor, sign me up. But still, the Bennets are always stressed that they don't have enough money. They've got economic anxiety. And why is that? Well, responsible people in the Bennets' position would take some of that £2,000 a year and save it and invest it in the 1800s equivalent of the stock market, or investing in their own estate, having good roads, fences, wells, dairies, grain mills, wool processing on all this land that they own, so their tenants can make good stuff with a little less work, prosper, sell things, maybe pay a little bit more rent. But we don't see the Bennet parents manage the estate, not even in a tell other people what to do kind of way. Instead, the Bennets have spent everything they've got on clothes, parties, extra servants. They're writing a huge estate into the ground, complaining about money the entire time. The only thing they really seem to be trying to improve their position is social climbing.
He has 5,000 a year.
They're trying to marry their daughters off to rich men. But to pull that off, they would need to give their daughters a nice big dowry. That's money or property you give your daughters to provide income for their new households. And the Bennets have nothing to give their daughters, because they've just spent everything they've earned for the last 25 years. That's the whole plot of Pride and Prejudice right there. The Bennets are a train wreck and everybody knows it. Most of the story is the two eldest Bennet daughters trying to be functional adults while everyone gawks at their parents running their estate into the ground. And it's why Mrs. Bennet is so excited at the start of the book when two new wealthy bachelors move into the neighborhood. She's thinking, maybe we can trap one before they find out we're useless. So that's the Bennets. Now we gotta talk the rest of these people.
By the way, if you are liking this video, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe, a comment. It really does tell the algorithm to show it to more people. I had to cut a lot for time, so I'm putting up a full-length version on Patreon shortly. It might go up on YouTube someday, but like, later.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Lady Catherine is the top of the social ladder for the whole region. She's got land, a noble title, and needs everybody to know it. She's not trying to get more out of life. She just wants to hang on to what her dynasty already has. She wants her daughter and her nephew to get married so all the land and the rent that got split between the two branches of the family come back together. It still kind of works like that today too. A lot of the US's land consolidation is not investors and corporations buying up farmland, it's landed gentry getting better and better at being landed gentry and getting more and more land. Now, Lady Catherine is such a big deal that she doesn't need good manners. She's used to just telling people what to do. But that gives Lady Catherine a problem. No one actually wants to listen to her, so she needs lieutenants. People who will talk to her little peasants, tattle on them, and deliver her opinions and make it sound like the word of the Lord, not just a lecture from the local self-important aristocrat. And that's why she's got herself a little Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins is a preacher man. Austen fans mostly know him as that weirdo who proposes to Elizabeth Bennet. She says no, and it's a whole thing because he's also her cousin who's going to inherit the estate when her dad dies, so she almost kind of made her whole family homeless there for a while. But that's just Mr. Collins' personal life, and he's got way more interesting stuff going on. Mr. Collins plays a key role in the landed gentry food chain that still exists today, which tragically makes Mr. Collins the key to understanding today's rural politics and economics. Mr. Collins' official job on paper is preacher, but what he actually does all day is be Lady Catherine's PR guy. He is a toady. And even in today's world of mass communication, most of how people understand how the world works and politics and decide where their loyalties lie comes from in-person conversations. That makes the Mr. Collinses of the world huge in shaping our political narratives, especially in smaller communities where local bigwigs carry a lot of weight, for reasons we'll get into shortly. I also just want to say the Mr. Collins character is funny because Jane Austen's dad was a clergyman. She wrote other clergy characters who were normal people, but the fact that she wrote Mr. Collins the way she did lets you know she's seen some stuff. So let's talk about why Mr. Collins is like that. Regency England really just had one church, the Church of England. That's the one that Henry VIII started after he canceled Catholicism. Henry VIII did not want this new church telling him and the nobles what to do. So the Church of England at this time basically had the aristocrats hire local clergymen. That's why Mr. Collins is always glazing Lady Catherine.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
That's literally his real job. Nobles picked who got to be clergy, so that's just how you got hired. And it's a big part of why Elizabeth Bennet cannot stand him. Mr. Collins is not just cringe. He is, bless his heart, a very special kind of parasite who makes the stupidest parts of Regency society possible. Marry him, and you join the family business, you gotta spend the rest of your life glazing too. Elizabeth Bennet thinks that's stupid, and is self-aware enough to know that she would never make it in the flattery business. Now, if you're looking for the modern-day equivalent to Mr. Collins, it's real easy to jump straight to pastor. And yeah, preachers absolutely can get cozy with wealth, that's not a secret. But remember, the US is not the same as Regency England. They had one church. We have, even in remote rural areas, dozens of churches. You really can't control an entire community's narrative by hiring a pastor like you could in Regency England. You'd have to personally sponsor dozens of churches. Setting up every wannabe preacher in your county with a house and a salary, that's just unreasonable. So in the US, the glaze the local landed gentry business kind of metastasized into the entire rural economy. We have Mr. Collinses everywhere, and here's why. In most of the rural US, there's 1 to maybe 5 families who own most of the county. And in rural areas, full-time jobs are scarce and usually tied to one of these big families, like middle management at their feed mill or construction company, or even just being chosen as the one who gets to rent a bunch of their farmland. To have any real future in rural America, you need your local landed gentry on your side. You gotta glaze. If you don't want to do that, you kinda have to leave. And then we act like it's a huge mystery why our rural areas keep getting emptier. The one other way to make a living in a rural community is get one of those skilled white-collar jobs that they can't really control. That's things like work in medicine at a hospital or clinic, teaching or administration at a school, or any federal jobs in that area. So if you've ever wondered why rural elected leaders seem to hate their own local schools and hospitals and clinics and federal services and are always trying to get rid of them, there's your answer. Any job where the rural aristocrats can't decide who gets it, especially if that job is talking to commoners all day, like teacher, that's a Mr. Collins that they don't get. And they really don't like that. So you can start to see how Jane Austen can really help us make sense of rural politics today, especially the parts that don't seem to make sense at first glance, like how some rural leaders seem to love destroying their own communities. And hey, even if you're a Lit fan who does not care about rural economics, just knowing the social scene that Austen was talking about really enhances the reading experience. It helps you understand that Mr. Darcy, 1, takes feedback, and 2, is actually trying to do right by his underlings. His housekeeper can't stop talking about what a cool boss he is, and the other landed gentry thought that was weird. They were like, okay, lady, we get it. You can stop talking up your boss already, he's not even here. But the fact that his own staff, who are around him all the time, thought he was a good dude, is what gets Elizabeth Bennet's attention and makes her go, huh, maybe he doesn't suck. I will take a second look at this man. And I will point out, cool bosses like this do exist in US agriculture. Every once in a while, you meet a big landed family who's like, here's how we built our farm to run well and make good money so we can treat our workers right. It's just less miserable that way. These families have the resources to do that, and they're secure enough to not care if their neighbors judge them for farming weird and making everybody else look bad. Yes, that is a real thing that can happen if you farm too good. These folks are out there and they are fantastic. I love them so much. And they are also pretty rare. They can feel pretty isolated as a result, which is legitimately really sad. And that rarity means the way our rural economies work is hope the local bosses are unicorns so the rest of us can have a shot at a decent life. And I don't think it should work that way. So anyway, that is how Jane Austen can help us make sense of rural economics and power in general. And now we should get on to the corporate farming part.
I gotta kick this off by saying I actually hate the term corporate farming because it is insanely misleading. The people doing quote-unquote corporate farming are almost always family farmers, multi-generational farm families with deep roots in the community. Landed gentry, that's who has the land to build these operations on and has the wealth to spin up the barns and equipment. When we call it corporate farming, I think that's cope. It's mental gymnastics. It's a way that we have taught ourselves to look right at the landed gentry and just not see it at all. Automated and industrialized farming did not come out of nowhere and take over family farms. What really happened is the rural US has always had a landed gentry. And in the 20th century, they went wild because the cost of labor went up. Now, higher wages are great for workers, and for once, those higher wages also made smaller farms that did most of their work themselves more competitive with landed gentry who hired more people. Smaller farmers often had an advantage in experience, too. A lot of them had worked their way up as laborers, so they really knew the hands-on, practical parts of farming. That's especially true, for example, for black farmers who were formerly enslaved, made their way north, or tried to farm in the South. White farmers did not want them around. The South responded with Jim Crow, and the North responded with sundown laws to keep black farmers from moving in and competing with them. People who were just born into land did not always have that level of experience, and that can really hurt you, especially when the job market's tight, so experienced farm labor costs real money. And the landed gentry did not want to pay people real money, so they developed a whole industry of tractors and reapers to replace farm workers. They were the early adopters, because they wanted to replace workers with machines. But replacing labor isn't the only thing mechanization did for the landed gentry. The wealthiest farm families realized that if they could turn farms into something where profit came from having bigger and bigger equipment, then it would be a rich man's game. The fact that working class farmers were often more experienced and better at actually doing the work, that would not matter anymore. Great deal for the landed gentry. And that's where what we now call agribusiness companies started to get involved. Imagine, if you will, a family like the Bennets. Somehow they wake up one day and realize, we could make money raising hogs. But that doesn't mean they know where to start. Or maybe they do know the raising the hogs part, but that's it. Really getting serious about it as a business means you'd have to hire people to raise and butcher and sell the hogs. Now you gotta build a slaughterhouse and supervise people. Well, that's just gonna cut into your biscuit time. So instead, you could just partner with other businesses to handle all that stuff for you. You've got a feed guy, a barn guy, and eventually these companies all kind of consolidated and became the modern agribusiness meat companies we know today. By the way, in the farm sector, we call these meat companies integrators because they integrate all the parts of the meat production side with also the customers and the buying side. Contracting with a meat company nowadays can be a lot like opening a restaurant franchise. Is it all sunshine and rainbows? No, but you do get to own a business with way less of the risk, without having to learn the entire business and run the whole thing yourself, and without having to build up your own customer base. It's like a pre-made kit for a business. And that's why franchise businesses are really popular. And if you're thinking, what a great sales pitch for integrators, hold that thought. The business in a kit thing also appeals to people who have some land, but not the funds or the background to build up a working farm themselves. And integrators can be real predatory towards these farmers. Minority farmers can also be extra easy targets because when they get in trouble, white neighbors can tend to just ignore it. So integrators sometimes know they can pick on them with less risk of blowback than usual. That absolutely can happen. And here's the thing, we already know integrators can be difficult. That's common knowledge at this point. It's also only half the story. The other half, and farmers who love integrators still exist, gets left out, because that part can get real awkward. But leaving that part out just makes the public more confused. When the only part we tell people is integrators can be naughty, let's fix that, then what happens? The public tries passing a law about it, and then the other farmers who do love integrators get on TV and say, you're killing my family farm. And the public goes, I had no idea, and backs off. Because they don't know about the landed gentry. They don't live out here. And we're not telling them different farmers want different things. Here's how that works. So you can decide who to listen to. And then we go, why won't any political party do anything about these corporations? It's because we're not telling the public what's really going on out here, so they don't know. How can anybody make an informed choice like that? We've been doing this runaround for decades now. I think that if we want different results, we need to do different things, and straight talk about money is a great start. Anyway, back to landed gentry and franchises. Now, the fact that the landed gentry loves franchises explains a lot about the birth of what we call corporate agribusiness. Agribusiness is not an outside force that invaded farm country. That was more of an inside job. The landed gentry fostered agribusiness themselves to replace rural labor and to do the parts of farming that the gentry didn't really care to do. You'll see a lot of folks from quite big landed families talk about how hard they work at dirty jobs, but if you actually look, a lot of the time those dirty jobs are driving trucks and tractors, or doing maintenance and upkeep in livestock barns where most of the actual work is automated. And I want to be clear, I think automation is amazing. More please, thank you. But we also need to be clear that in our history, automation is when a lot of landed families suddenly became okay with doing their own chores. It's less likely to destroy your body, and if you can do 15 people's worth of work by yourself in a couple hours, it becomes worth it to finally do your own work on your own property. So this is when a lot of landed gentry families who outsource most of their work became what we would consider family farmers today. How they handled their work might look different than it was 100 years ago, but it's still a lot of the same families with the same attitudes in the same financial position. And even new families who've joined agriculture since then tend to assimilate into that set of values and that social structure, because everybody just wants to fit in. So there's a lot of well-meaning talk out there about how family farmers are suffering from agribusiness, but that ignores so much of what's actually going on out here, especially when it comes to families that farm hogs and broilers, that's meat chickens, on contract. You might want to sit down for this part, but most of the families that raise contract livestock are doing okay for themselves. The fact that a lot of hog and broiler farmers are actually doing quite well financially explains a lot, like why rural lawmakers just don't seem motivated to do anything to rein in meat companies. It's not just campaign contributions from the meat companies, folks. A lot of their actual constituents don't see the need. And I want to be clear, you will absolutely get some families that don't thrive under this setup, often because they are not in the tax bracket that this type of farming was built for. That's bad, and these folks do need a way out. But this type of farming was designed to build wealth for a specific kind of family with maybe more resources than skills. So when people who mean really well talk about chickenization and contract meat farming as the new sharecropping, that's wild. Because most contract livestock farmers at this point are fairly affluent white landowners who are doing this on purpose. Y'all really think people are out here just building 8, 10, 12 chicken and hog houses because the first 6 didn't make money? Where do you even start with people who look at that and call it sharecropping? It kind of makes me think they don't really know or care what sharecropping actually is. And it's great that we want to talk about the farmers who aren't doing well with raising contract livestock. But I think sometimes we do that to avoid talking about the even larger group of farmers who are thriving with it. Because nice, affluent Christian family is farming this way on purpose, nobody's making them do this, is a really uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people to have. If you look too close at what's actually going on in quote-unquote corporate agriculture, you start to realize freaky stuff like there is no clean divide between family and corporate farming. It's not all David and Goliath struggle out here. There's a lot of cozy symbiosis between agribusiness and a certain kind of family farm. That symbiosis is a huge part of rural America's story, and we have completely missed it. Because the US has spent centuries pretending that we don't have a landed gentry. That's going to make you miss a lot of what's happening in your own country, economically, culturally, and politically. So now we've talked about what the landed gentry gets out of partnering with agribusiness. What does agribusiness get out of partnering with the landed gentry? A lot of things, but a big one is access to the landed gentry's political networks. Multinational agribusiness corporations aren't very popular with the public. So to get the political results they want, they need farmers to vouch for them. And the people willing to do that are usually going to be the farmers who are doing well with them, so landed gentry. Say you want to build a slaughterhouse. You'll need someone local to grease the wheels for you. Someone with buddies on the county commission, and maybe even the state legislature. You just have to know the relevant Mr. Collinses and Lady Catherines and convince them that your project is going to be good for them, the landed gentry and their toadies. That's how politics actually work in rural areas. It's not complicated. And it also shouldn't be surprising because This is how politics work in cities too, isn't it? Everyone's out here talking urban-rural divide, and I'm like, divide where? City or country doesn't really matter. Old money families, usually white, own just about everything. They call the shots, and everybody else has to pay them rent. Where's the difference? We're chasing our tails in this whole city versus country thing, and we're exactly the same. We should be talking about that. Anyway, we were supposed to talk landed gentry in the Farm Bill, so let's do that. Over the last 10 years, states in the US have started passing animal welfare laws. They're kind of a must be this tall to ride situation, except it's animals must have this much room to turn around to sell their meat in our state. Now you would think this would be devastating to farmers and agriculture. We're always being told, them dang hippies keep trying to regulate farms out of business, right? Except, here's what's actually happening. A quarter of the entire US hog industry has already changed their farms to meet these higher humane standards. Now, agriculture is slow. And you don't get a quarter of a $30 billion some dollar industry in agriculture making that big a change in just 10 years if that change ain't making money. A lot of farmers who've made that change are talking about how the animals are healthier, they're losing fewer of them, and the price is better. So they're actually coming out ahead after changing up their hog farm, and they are glad they did it. I'll link some of their stories in the description. I get the sense that a lot of these farmers are on the small and medium end because it's just quicker to remodel a small farm than a big one. But also, if it's a quarter of the hog industry that's already changed, it can't be just small and medium farms that have made that change already. You know? What's weird is, while all this is going on, there are also hog farmers who insist that these laws will ruin them and they shouldn't be allowed. So they want to stick something in the Farm Bill called the Save Our Bacon Act that will ban states from passing laws about animal welfare. And yes, the law to ban states from passing animal welfare laws is the SOB Act. A+ branding. So what's going on? Why do some farmers love these animal welfare laws and others insist that they're the end of the world? The short answer, this anti-animal welfare push isn't scrappy little guys fighting to keep their land. It looks to me like this is the landed gentry doing a Mr. Collins for their literal corporate overlords. And here's why I think that. There's only one meat company that's actually come out against these animal welfare laws. Everyone else is adapting just fine. Most of the farmers who are saying this will ruin agriculture work for that same company. And that company is Smithfield. Yes, that's Smithfield, the one that's owned by a hedge fund based in Hong Kong. So this is where we take a quick break to talk about what US viewers can do about this. Once this farm bill hits the Senate, then it's time to get a hold of your senators. Until then, farm advocates are working on the integrators themselves. Hey, we see you pushing this bill, knock it off. Integrators like to go under the radar, so when they feel heat from the public, that can actually get them to back off. There is an open letter you can sign, the link is down in the description, to let the integrators know, hey girl, we see you. And if or when things kick up to, now it's time to take this to the Senate, they'll send you info on how to do that. Okay, back to what's going on with Smithfield. Technically, I think Smithfield can't actually lobby about the bill because they're a foreign-owned corporation, but the farmers who work for them can. Now you gotta ask, why would Smithfield's farmers work so hard to vouch for their corporate bosses? It's not that hard to understand. A lot of them are doing pretty well from partnering with Smithfield. So in that sense, it is genuine friendship and appreciation. But there's also a very real Lady Catherine and Mr. Collins dynamic going on here. It can be very rewarding to hype up your corporate overlords in public. These farms work on contract, so how much they get paid per pound of pig is private. Farmers may hope for their contracts to get juicier. Companies like Smithfield and the nonprofits they sponsor also give out fellowships and awards, and those are good for your clout in landed gentry social circles. So contract farmers can be motivated to compete for those. It's social climbing. And I mean compete, because that kind of recognition is competitive. It's not enough to just advocate for Smithfield's interests, you gotta stand out. You gotta do the most to stand up for Smithfield, which helps explain why a lot of these farmers are so loud and enthusiastic about this. It's competitive. Now, why is Smithfield the one and only company that's really making a fuss about these animal welfare laws? We can make an educated guess. The company that owns Smithfield is WH Group, based in Hong Kong. And for what it's worth, I think the whole China's trying to buy up our farmland thing is very silly. If they wanted to buy up farmland, they would just do that. They wouldn't waste their time and money buying Smithfield. Buying Smithfield suggests they're probably just actually in the market for cheap, abundant pork. And that honestly makes a ton of sense. China's got 1.4 billion people, a booming middle class that wants meat, and not a ton of farmland or water to grow it with. Meanwhile, the US has way more land than we need to feed ourselves. So us selling food to China just makes sense. And I kind of think it would be cool if we could all just be normal about that. The problem for Smithfield here is the more US states pass animal welfare laws, the more US hog farmers will switch over to more humane methods. And that's a little bit more costly. And it's also kind of crazy because the price difference isn't that much. It's like in the few cents per pound range. I think it's possible there are just some big emotions going on in Smithfield corporate offices. Just the fact that US states could pass their own animal welfare laws could make Smithfield believe and feel like there goes my whole business model of most pork at minimum cost. That's almost certainly what's going on. Now here's the crazy part. This Save Our Bacon Act thing does mean that Smithfield is a foreign-owned corporation trying to ban Americans from passing our own laws, simply because it's more convenient if we can't do that. And it might actually work, because when they bought Smithfield, WH Group also bought Smithfield's network of politically influential landed gentry, who are apparently very happy to serve their corporate overlords in Hong Kong. And that's the part that gets me. If we're gonna worry about Smithfield being a national security problem, I think we should worry about that, but we're not. Everybody's busy freaking out about China's buying up our farmland, which isn't really happening, and ignoring the very real soft power political influence campaign that is happening. And that brings us to another really important thing about landed gentry. They are just not that invested in democracy or the well-being of the little people around them. A lot of US landed gentry has more in common financially with investors in China than they do with their neighbors. And it is so tempting to see that as a China's trying to get us problem. But I think that's a mistake. The landed gentry are a domestic political problem that we've always had. This is just the shenanigan they're doing this year. Throughout world history, whenever landed gentry get too powerful, they do tend to undermine and overthrow their governments for personal gain. That's a pattern. This has happened to most major empires, often multiple times. The United States has only existed for 250 years, and it's already happened here twice. 6 times if you count Georgia, California, Texas, and Hawaii. I'm sure I still missed a few. Let me know in the comments. Now, the way the landed gentry usually gets enough power to do all of that is because people gave it to them. Tax breaks, subsidies, contracts to do nothing, authority to abuse peasants with impunity. Sound familiar? And then, as their thank you, big landowners keep raising up generals, demagogues, rebellions, or they throw in their lot with whatever foreign power promises them just a little bit more, and take their own nations apart for personal gain. And I don't think that's inevitable. Landed gentry keep winding up with that much power because their nations give it to them. So let me ask you this. What if we just didn't do that? And while we're at it, how about we don't let them help a foreign government ban us from passing our own laws? And that's going to take some spine, because this world is full of Mr. Collinses. There are always going to be people telling you how if we don't bend over backwards to save our farmers and landowners, among other entrenched interests, well then the world is just going to end. And the work of Jane Austen is phenomenal for helping us grow that spine. It's about a world full of landed folk who were desperate to grow their power without really having to work for it. And here in the US, we are not so far away from that as we might want to think. So it's really good to sit with the lessons of the past. Not for comfort and nostalgia, but to actually learn something. Y'all do good out there.